our meeting, our monthly meeting. Thank you very much for joining us. Remember, we meet over there at the Toasted Yolk. You're more than welcome to come by. It's good food. Thank you, Hal, for pointing that place out for us. Hal, you're a gentleman in this. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So thank you, Hal. So anyway. So what we're going to do today as we await Ralph and any announcements you might have, we're going to go ahead and go over some material, just 3 quick videos and then we'll go ahead and proceed with the meeting. So first one that I have for you, should I go ahead and share this quick?
Yeah, you're co-host, so you can do what you need.
Hi, Ralph. Hey, good morning, guys. Hello. Oh.
No, I think there's a bylaw on the club notes that says if you're late to a meeting as president, you get a second term.
I think that is true.
You're right, Don. I think you have to, our force actually serve a third. And then I told him, you ought to know. Yeah, I know. I'm on my way.
So let me go ahead and share this. I thought was a pretty interesting video. Hopefully you like it. And again, this is going to be just sort of as a warm up for our meeting, essentially the wonder of radio. And a quick anecdote.
Ici Sam, depuis la Terre, j'appelle la station spatiale. Vous m'attendez? Vous m'attendez?
Pour communiquer avec l'espace, il vous faut une très grande antenne, à plusieurs sections et en aluminium.
J'appelle la station spatiale. Vous m'attendez? Sam, depuis la Terre, j'appelle la station spatiale. Vous m'attendez?
聞こえますよ。聞こえますか？
こんにちは。こちらは
ジャパニーズスペースステーションです。もしもし、連絡してくれてありがとう。聞こえますよ。
The second is going to be something that we were just discussing with Martin actually before the meeting. There was a Hamfest, was it last week, and I picked up a dummy load. So with that dummy load, I was able to set up this measurement that I think you might find interesting. It's actually finding out the actual power output by a Shigu G90 using a dummy load. Essentially, you can do that with a power meter, of course, but this is more of a more basic technique. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and see how we can measure the output power of our transceiver, our Shigu G90, using an oscilloscope and a dummy load. So the idea then is that we want to the output power of our transceiver. So for that, the way we're going to set this up is we're going to go ahead and put this essentially in series. I think we need more with a dummy load. So let's sketch out what we intend to do. First, what we're going to have is our Shigu G90.
Volume 60.
And then what we're going to have is our dummy load. And then what we're going to use is an oscilloscope. The oscilloscope that we're going to use is going to be based on a laptop. It's actually the 2204 picoscope. So this is connected via USB to a box, which is the guts of the oscilloscope. And it's going to actually have our measuring circuit. So out of this transceiver, we're going to have our antenna lead coming in this direction, and it's going to go up here
to what we essentially have as a connection in here, but in T, we're going to be coming out and we're going to be going into the times 10 probe of the oscilloscope. Remember, this right here is just our laptop running the Pico software that essentially makes for a software oscilloscope. So that's the idea. And then what we're going to say is we're going to measure and compare our power actual or measured versus our power displayed. In the G90. One more thing to note is that we need to go ahead and do some formula derivation of what exactly we're wanting to do. So again, we're going for power, which if we remember is voltage times current. Now, we also know that Ohm's law tells us that V equals to IR, which implies that I equals to V over R. Now, if we go ahead then and take this expression for I and insert it into our expression for power, we end up with, in other words, this implies or becomes V equals to V times V over R, or V squared over R. Now, the power that we're going to be using, of course, is the RMS power. So we have to do one bit of adjusting here. In other words, this power right here is going to be the RMS. But the reason we have to do this conversion is that we're going to be measuring volts peak in the oscilloscope. Actually, we could measure volts peak to peak, and that would be equal to the volts peak times 2. So then volts peak, which we divide here, or just measure volts peak directly off of the scope, is then equal to 1/2 V peak to peak. And the other bit that we need is that VRMS, which is what we're looking for, in terms of VP, is square root of 2 divided by 2 times V peak. So again, just recapping, either we measure volts peak to peak off of the scope, or we measure volts peak. And then once we have that, we can go ahead and insert volts peak here, and then obtain our voltage RMS. Once we have voltage RMS, we take that fellow and insert it into here, and we get our power. So that's going to be the plan of attack. Now, let's look at our experimental setup and then do some measurements. At the beginning of this experiment, then, what we're going to confirm is that the dummy load is indeed giving us a 1-to-1 SWR. So the G90 has the capability to give us that information, to do a sweep. So we take the power key and just hold it down. We notice right here that the G90 is showing a 1-to-1 SW. You barely see the yellow line hugging the x-axis, which is actually in a white line configuration, but the yellow and the white are overlapping. And down here, you actually see 1.0. So we actually have a 1-to-1 SWR to start out our experiment. Okay, starting over here with the Shigu G90, we have it right here. And back here, we have the output lead coming out there. And it's going through this coax cable, which is, I believe it's an RG8X, coming into our dummy load. This dummy load I just got today at a Hamfest, and it's rated up to 1,000 watts. So for the powers of up to 20 watts that we expect, maybe 25, 30 most, we should be okay. Now the setup that I've got over here are some crossovers because this is PL259, SO239. I'm going to BNC. And the reason I've done this is that I want to use the times 10x probe. So I had to go ahead and set this up so that it goes in there and the grounding goes right out there on the sheath of the BNC connector. And on this side right here, we have the rest of the setup. That's the oscilloscope right there. That's the picoscope 2204. We're coming in through the yellow lead. And this is going to be our oscilloscope display, this laptop, this old laptop. So that's the intent. Now let's go ahead and furnish a voltage through our setup. For that, what we're going to do is we're going to see the power level, and we see that the power level is set to 5 watts. So then we go back here, and now we go ahead and apply a voltage. And right there, we have a voltage showing here. Up in this area right here, essentially we position the cursor here on the top part and on the bottom part, and we measure 51.32 volts. 51.32 volts is what we're going to write down in our results. So we write down 51.32 volts. We won't put the units here so it's not to confuse matters. So we'll go ahead and turn on the calculator. 51.32, enter, 2 divided by, that becomes 25.66. And we're going to play a little bit loose on the significant figures. We'll just keep it to 2 significant figures. So the voltage RMS then is the square root of 2 over 2 times this value. So that'll be 0.707 times. So that gives me 18.142. Okay, and then that one we want to square. So we'll go ahead and do purple square. That's that number. And then divided by 50. 50 divided by. That gives us an actual value of 6.58 watts. Again, we're not going to clutter up the display with units. However, notice that according to the Shigu G90, the P display, the power displayed was 5 watts. So a little bit higher than what is displayed. We'll keep on going and filling out maybe for 10, 15, and maybe 20 watts. Okay, so now what we've done is we've gone ahead and increased the power to 10 watts on the Shigu G90. So now what we do is we go ahead and furnish a signal. And let the autofocus or auto threshold apply. So then we increase this a little bit higher to get the envelope. And then the lower threshold, we lower that guy a little bit more. And what we're seeing right up here is 69.06. So now we will write 69.06. Enter. 2 divided by 34.53. 0.707 times 24.41, and then what we want to do is to square, so we go squared and then divide by 50. So we get 11.92. And again, our P displayed, we saw that to be 10 watts. Go ahead and put watts in this last column so that it becomes very clear that we're talking about voltages here, and these right here are volts. I don't want to put any more units there, but voltages in volts, power in watts. And so let's continue filling out the table, maybe for 15 and 20, and see what we get. 15 watts of power in the Shigu. And let's go ahead and key up. And see what we get. We go over here, we increase the top indicator so that we can get the envelope curve, and then do the similar change of the envelope curve down here. Let's see if I can get it right there. Okay, so that's about right there. So that's about the envelope curve. So now what we're seeing is 82.26 volts of delta, or peak to peak. So we wrote down 82.26 divided by 2, multiplied it by 0.707, or square root of 2 over 2, and then squared that VRMS and divided by 50, which is the value of our resistance of the dummy load, and we got 16.91 watts, which compares to the 15 watts that is displayed on the Shigu G90. Again, we're a little bit high in actual measurement compared to what is displayed in the Shigu. Okay, we'll go ahead and change it to 20 watts now for the last data point. That's the maximum power that we can turn it to, and we can see that it's 20 watts on the Shigu G90. So now we'll key up. And let's see what we get for the envelope. Not that much difference, it would seem, but a little bit more. So we can make sure we get those peaks up there. And then down here, similarly, we drop the threshold so that we make sure that we get those peaks down there. So then our peak to peak is 93.58 volts. So the value that we measured was 93.58, and we can go through the calculations. 93.58, enter. To get V peak, we divide by 2, so 2 divided by 46.79, multiply times 0.707, which is square root of 2 over 2. To get the VRMS, we get 33.08, and to get the actual power, we have to square this voltage. This is the square of voltage RMS. So we go purple x squared, and then 50 divided by. And that gives us 21.88.886. So I rounded up to 21.89. And that's the actual power that we're measuring with our experimental setup. And that compares, as expected, a little bit higher than what is displayed on the Shigu G90, which is 20 watts. So that concludes this experiment. I mean, we've essentially used an experimental setup to measure our actual power output by a transceiver using a dummy load and an oscilloscope.
Did you create a calibration curve, or?
No, and I think that's the thank you, Mark, for finding the issue. No, that's good, actually, because that could be actually the problem with it. What I did was, at the very beginning of the experiment, I measured the SWR, quote unquote, by doing a sweep with the Shigu G90 has that internal sweep capability. And it showed a 1-to-1 SWR. 1-to-1 SWR to me tells me I've got 50 ohms on the dummy. However, what are my error bars? What's the tolerance? No idea. So then I took a nano VNA, which we talked about in a previous presentation about 2-3 years ago here. And the nano VNA tells you exactly how much resistance you have for that frequency range. So going over to the 15 meter band, 21.093 or whatever I had, megahertz, I measured that range for the on the nano VNA, and it showed a little bit off. It showed like 52 ohms. So there could be some tolerance, some error bars on that 50 ohm. And if you notice, it was just done very quickly there, that we're dividing by 50. Remember, it was V squared over 50. And we just assume 50 as rock solid. Well, that could be the source of error. I do not have a calibration curve for my resistance.
My next question is how do you calibrate the test setup? Do you have a standard?
Right. So what I did is, of course, with a probe, you can actually calibrate it with the scope and make your square waves, properly square. But that's not really what we're after here. The closest I could come up with on that one was to go ahead and turn the ×10 probe. This is not a calibration, but just turn it to ×1. Because discussing with Paul Rubin at the Hamfest, when I was about to get the dummy load, I explained to him this setup, and he said, yeah, the only thing you got to look out for is with your measurement setup, you could be loading that antenna. In other words, if the impedance is not very high, then you could actually be affecting the measurement that you're trying to make, right? So your circuit needs to be, so that's why, before I did this, I put it in the ×1, plugged it in directly into that T, and put it into the ×1 measurement, and then try to do a sweep of my dummy load. And sure enough, the dummy load was a low. It was not close to 1-to-1. When I turned it to ×10, that's the best I could do as far as making it a high impedance. But was it infinite? Of course not. Was it high enough? According to the Shigu's sweep, it was giving me a 1-to-1. But obviously, we're skeptical about what the tolerance is. It's just an interesting thing to share with you guys. That V squared over R actually works. So yeah.
So what's the bandwidth of that scope here?
It's not that wide. I mean, the 2204. It's a UK company actually. It's Pico scope, and it's their cheapest model. It's the Pico 2204. And, it's not that fancy. For example, I tried to measure 50 megahertz or something like that. Didn't get very far. So
yeah, it appeared to me from the waveform that you were aliasing. You weren't sweeping fast enough to see
exactly
the same amplitude at all the peaks. You should see the same amplitude at all the peaks.
Exactly. That's a very good point. If you noticed, that was another source of error potentially there, was that you noticed the beeping when I was trying to send my scope a signal.
You were doing CW, I presume?
It was a CW key, correct. I was holding back here and pushing down on my straight key. Right. So what that was doing, it was trying to sync up a signal on the scope. I was not syncing up properly so as to give me a pure sine wave. So I was doing, and eventually with my one.
You kept pressing until you got a trigger?
I got a trigger, exactly. I was pressing it until I got a trigger. And then at some point it would trigger and it would freeze. The setting on the scope was, once I'm done, just one time, freeze it.
Yeah, single trigger.
Single trigger. So a single trigger and freeze, whatever the setting was on the scope. But yeah. But the interesting thing though, somebody commented on this video, is that they noticed that there was some folks doing this type of measurement with an HP something or other, a $1,000 scope.
Yeah.
And they also came up with, and of course, this correlation imply causality. I'm not sure, but they also found that their measurements were about 20-30% over what the Shigu was showing. And there's a Dave Kassler video about doing this kind of scope, and he's using not a Rhodian Schwartz, but I'm not sure which scope, but an actual oscilloscope, a hardware oscilloscope. But mine is a cheap version of an oscilloscope, but it works. And he also got something along this.
I agree with the posted. Sorry, all the readings were high compared to what the rig.
Compared to what the Shigu was saying. So the Shigu was being a bit conservative.
But again, introduce some losses through all your connections, a little bit of resistivity in there.
Right. And I got a question from Martin just earlier about what type of cables I'm using. It's RG8X.
So wire cable.
Sorry?
Wire.
The coax.
Wire. Wire cable.
The coax.
They're
Okay.
lines.
I think Okay,
Yeah, the other
sorry.
thing-
It's a wire cable, not a rope one.
You guys that want to do this experiment at home, also remember that you need to make sure your oscilloscope can tolerate the voltages that you're reading.
Yeah.
A lot of, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the voltage limit on the probes that you're using in your scope were somewhere on the order of 40 volts. But be sure to check that before you start driving, even 20 watts into a 50 ohm load, you're going to get some pretty high voltages that a lot of scopes don't tolerate. And you could wind up burning up your scope or probe. So if you're going to do that experiment, check all the specs.
Agreed. Or exactly, good point from Barry. I mean, essentially, the scope, you could actually blow the scope. Something that wasn't shown in this video is the prep work that happened. And I was doing exactly that. I just gave it 1 watt and see what I got on my scope. Okay, I'm not blowing the scope is surviving. And then I figured, okay, it goes to 20 watts. And then I tried it to 100 watts and even that, ramping up with the IC7300.
Like you're going to get 70 volts, I believe, peak, 100 watts into 50 ohms. I believe that's what it comes out to.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Because we're getting 90 something volts peak to peak with 20 watts. So it's definitely ramps up. I think at 100 watts, that's about as much as I would want to drive that scope with. But yeah, definitely be aware to use the right probes. Don't blow your scope. Okay.
The voltage rating also can change whether you're times 1 or times 10. So that's the other thing to watch.
Yep. Yep. Interesting stuff. So anyway, so I thought I'd share this with you guys. Ralph, I don't know if you want to go into something right now, or we can go into the satellites.
Go into the satellite. That will segue into what I want to talk about.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hopefully you guys have find that satellite communications is really something really cool about our hobby. So I was just listening to a talk last week from the Peruvian Radio Club, the guys that I sync up with in Peru. And Oscar, OA4AMN, was giving a talk, and he was just ecstatic. He was so enthusiastic about satellites that it was infectious. So his approach was just try it basic. Don't try to get this extremely expensive antenna and go out into the middle of Fulshire and pasture lands over there and try to sync up to it. Just see what you've got right now. See if you can listen to a satellite. So you'd be amazed. Well, this is what the presentation is going to be about. These are the results. So I use the TYTTH 9800. That's a run-of-the-mill cheapo mobile radio at 5 watts. And this program is ISS detector. You'll hear more about that. It's actually quite useful. It's for the iPhone. It tells you when the satellites are coming across. And I use the ISS also. Oh, actually, in this case, it was A091. It's an FM satellite, if you've heard about these things. Oh, sorry. And the correct number was A091, but it's not a degree upgrade. So it's simply programming one of the radios to one frequency and channel to the second frequency. And this program, this ISS detector, has to go to the ISS. That's a good point. For the satellites, most of the satellites are, well, a word about the satellites. Satellites are, the FM satellites are the ones that I'm hitting, because this is an FM transceiver. And it does require a 67 hertz tone. Remember the CTCSS tone? You have to ping it with 67 hertz. So you put your uplink at 67 hertz for your CTCSS. The downlink, I also put the 67 hertz, although the downlink, I don't think it matters because I'm going to be hearing it. I'm not pinging it with 67 hertz. I'm just listening to it. So this side of the radio has 67 hertz, but that's perfunctory. On this side, it's very important because your uplink needs to be 67 CTCSS, so you can actually ping the satellite. And then the other thing, just to notice, I was using the Baofeng because there's a lot of YouTubes and such that say, oh, you can use the Baofeng to actually compensate for the polarization. So this is the first time I even heard anything from the satellite, so I'm trying the Baofeng out the window. And then you'll hear the signal coming off the main speaker very loud. Up to now, it's been static.
Whiskey 2, Whiskey Foxtrot, Echo Lima 29.
The only thing, since this is a very finite pass, very short-lived, we're talking about that at breakfast, you pretty much just say your call sign and your maiden head locator. Whiskey 2, Whiskey Foxtrot, Echo Lima 29. That's it. And you'll hear a lot of people, like that fellow from southern Mexico, Oaxaca, was going ahead and contacting a fellow in Los Angeles in Southern California. So.
Whiskey 2, Whiskey Foxtrot, Echo Lima 29.
That pretty much was it. I mean, essentially that was the content. So these contacts are very short-lived. And again, all we're doing here is just listening to something coming off of the A491 sound. Another point is that these satellites then are going to be coming across very fast. And they're going to be tumbling. So that's where the polarization business comes in. My antenna is fixed on my roof with a mag mount. So I'm not changing around the polarization with my antenna. So that's probably why also my pass is very short. But I was pretty thrilled that, I got to hear a satellite in my driveway in Katy. So that was pretty.
The base station, or do you have to?
I tried it from the base station. The problem is that I've got a Yagi, a home-built Yagi, sticking out of my crepe myrtle tree on the second floor, and then that one is fixed in one direction. So if the pass of the satellite goes in that area, up and down, where that satellite, where that antenna is pointing, then I can hear it for a little bit, but I get better results with the short vertical in the driveway.
Yeah, when I've been trying to receive the images from the space station, I've got a 2-meter J pole, about 20 foot above grade, just in the backyard. So I look for at least a 20-degree elevation above the horizon, and preferably to the south of my house, the path a little bit to the south. That's a clear path for me. And I picked up lots of those images from the space station.
Yep.
So just like that, just a J pole in the air, not steerable or anything.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, exactly. And that point that Ralph just made is very important. If you had obstructions, remember, you're in the VHF, UHF range. So a tree is going to play heck on your signal. A building, that's why my driveway was towards the west side of the house. If the satellite's going on the east side, I'm not going to hear that satellite because I've got the house in it. So any sort of obstruction.
Very nice neighbor.
Fair question.
Space station works the same way where you come from.
Space station is better.
Space station.
Space station is better.
Is it?
Yes, because it doesn't tumble. That's my theory. And these satellites, the AO91, has got to be doing all kinds of, tumbling motion. So the polarization is switching on you. You're trying to zero in. Space station is like that video with a kid contacting the station. It just flies at least one orientation. So their antenna is constantly polarized in a particular direction.
Yeah, some of the satellites are spin stabilized, some are not, they just tumble. You need to look up the particulars on the satellite.
Right. Yeah. Something like, but AO91 looks like a box, so I'm sure it's doing the tumbling. The 3 contacts, Robert, that I was able to make, and I'll mention it here right quick, they were actually with the space station. But this is essentially just a summary. It was a first attempt at this thing. Next time I'll try 50 watts. Okay, so this is going to be a quick presentation on satellite operations made easy. Again, just for a first approximation, just see if we can even hear a satellite. The satellite that I picked on, as Robert was mentioning, is the ISS, the International Space Station. I've had better luck with that. I think it may be because of this tumbling thing and polarizability change.
Brad on Zoom has a question for you.
Sure.
It may have cut out a little bit, but I was wondering when you were doing the satellites in your car, what were you just using a regular dual band antenna?
Brad, say that again.
I was asking when he was doing the satellites in his car, was it just the regular mag mount dual band antenna? It was the music from the video was cutting out a lot of the audio on Zoom, so I couldn't hear everything.
Yes, it was the Senegoya mag mount, but it's a $60 antenna and it's about yay big.
Quarter wave vertical.
Quarter wave vertical.
Okay, cool.
Again, the idea with this EZ business here is that you might already have what it takes, and just give it a shot. That might be something to try.
All right.
Okay. So I recommend trying the satellite. There's a satellite picking on state and ISS pass because I've had better luck with those than even AO91. And there's a few satellites that are available for you for FM. Not that many. There's a bunch of satellites that are amateur radio satellites, but they have other modes of operation, like SSB. So I don't have an SSB 2 meter, 70 centimeter transceiver, so I stay away from those. Or there's CW. There's beacons of CW, but to actually do CW that quick, I haven't got the guts up for that one yet. So I stick with audio and FM. So that narrows it down to AO91, AO27, AO7, and ISS, as far as I can. Oh, this cast.
Is that simplex?
Yes, it is simplex. Simplex in the sense that, well, that's a caveat. I don't think so, because you're uplinking in one frequency, but the satellite is going to echo back in a separate band.
But no count.
No, it always includes the 67 hertz CTCSS. But simplex in the way that it truly is not simplex, because again, you're uplinking in one, and it's.
I guess I meant with our tone or not.
With a tone or without, yeah, this does have the 67 hertz tone. All of the satellites I've just mentioned have required.
Well, this is the space station.
This space station also. Space station has a bunch of transducers up there. So it's not just this one, there's others. This is the one that I've had the best luck. These are the frequencies for it. For uplink and downlink, 67 hertz is got to be your CTCSS. The radio, you might already have that in your vehicle. Just one that has 2 channels that'll work for them. Power, the first try that you saw the video for was 5 watts. Nobody heard me. So I tried 50 watts and I got 2 contacts the first time I tried it, so I'm pretty happy about that. The antenna, as simple as it gets. A Mac mount Nagoya, 2 meters, 70 centimeters on the roof of the vehicle. Remember, this is also a non-unidirectional antenna. So we're talking at breakfast that many folks maybe just use a baofeng with 5 watts and they're able to ping the site, the bird. But they're also using these antennas that are Yagis that are obviously very single directional focused antennas. So that's why they think they can get away with that little power. I'm using a non-unidirectional antenna. So I'm radiating 50 watts in a donut shape. So that means that it's probably not hitting the satellite with a lot of power. So I'm using 50 watts. And the iPhone program to find out when these passes are, I used ISS detector. This was recommended by Oscar, OA or AMN in that talk last week. So that's why I selected it. It's got all the information. Okay, so you can try these. I mean, this is what they talk about in a lot of videos out there. These are these really cool Arrow antennas. Arrow, I guess, is the manufacturer. It's got a handle on one side. The fellow's usually having, or the ladies are having, just a baofeng or something with 5 watts transmitting capability. But you see them doing this now. And they're doing that to compensate for the polarization of the tumbling satellite or a moving satellite. Some people get really fancy and get these tracking setups on tripods or on their roof mounts, and it actually track the satellite. But that was not what we were going for. We were going for as simple as it gets. That's the magma antenna. You can actually see it on the vehicle outside. It's just about yay big. You might already have that. I tried this right here, the TYT TH9800, but you might already have something like one channel over here for your uplink, one channel over here for your downlink, and pencil and paper, as simple as it gets. Because once they start talking, it goes very quick, and they're not going to repeat the call sign unless you're lucky enough for that one station to be contacting a second station or a second station contacting them. You get a second shot, so you have to write down their call sign. That's probably the most challenging. They're very quick, and you have to write. Satellite tracking software is important. You want to know exactly what's the uplink frequency, downlink frequency of what satellite. You might again try the ISS first. They've got a very, very good signal coming down. So that this is one software that, and there's many of them. This one you can get on your PC, but it doesn't, unless you pay for the full version, it sort of covers one of the frequencies. So they're sneaky about that. You can't move that little advertisement window out of the way, so you don't know what frequency they're transmitting. So, but anyway, but ISS detector runs on your iPhone and gives you all the information.
Excuse me, let me just jump in here for a second. We got a bunch of new hands today. Everybody passed their test. Young man here, he got 100 on his technician test, so that was 3 techs, a general, and an extra. Everybody passed. Guys, thanks very much.
Thank you. And congratulations to the new guys. So polarization, I'm not going to delve into this too much, but it's just a reminder. It's how you orient your antenna. If it's either polarized in this direction in the vertical axis, then that's where the waves are going for, and that's what you're going to be listening for. If you go horizontal, they're going to be in the horizontal axis. So that's why you see these people moving their antennas, so they can match the polarization of the emitting transmitter. As Ralph was mentioning, this is the parking garage at a middle school or junior high near where I live. And there's not that many cars when I was out there, but I just set up in the middle there where I have as least obstructions as possible. Trees are not your friends, at least in this frequency. So they're going to absorb your signals and they're going to block the signals from the satellite. So look out for trees and structures. They will block you and you won't be able to see them. So ideally you want to be actually out in the field. I actually drove out to Fulshire and actually just went out to the middle of nowhere, sort of like a cow pasture, and tried my luck there. I found that Beck Junior High, this junior high here, is just as well. So just a good empty parking lot will work. And these are so far just the different contacts I've tried and I've not made. Where you see NC, that's no contact. So you can see that quite a few of these have been dry runs. So there's a bunch of, so the ISS was contacted there, no contact. You know, CAS 3H, another satellite, no contact. But every once in a while, you know, God smile on it, and you're able to get N6EFD, that's a California station, Delta Mike 03, the Los Angeles area, W4KSY, Northern Georgia, E?4. According to QRZ, he's in E74, but I was only able to hear E4. And this one is in the driveway of the house, full sure when I drove out to the cow pasture, and I got no contacts. So that was not bad. Beck Junior High, I heard this one fellow, N5CI. I heard him and he said, okay, QSL. So I think we made a contact there. I tried it from the shack on this one, no contacts. And so it's just hit or miss. It's fun.
The astronauts on the space shuttle will talk, on the space station will talk to you, yes?
Yes.
Do they use the same frequencies or a different one?
No, that's a very good question. Somebody asked about that. But can you hear the astronauts? Yes, you can. If they're, you know, so inclined to be transmitting it, wanting to have a QSO with you. It's not on these frequencies. This is actually one of the, remember, the space station has a bunch of stuff, transmitters, transducers, so transceptors. And if you go at 145.990 uplink and receive on 437.8 downlink, you're talking to their repeater. It's like K5 QVG, like Wayne's repeater, but 427 kilometers up.
Right.
So that's where you're talking there. On another frequency, they operate NA1SS, I think it is. And that's the space station people. And that's where it's a different set of frequencies, different pair. And you talk to somebody there and they talk to you. They talk to schools a lot and things like that.
Then they've got another frequency they use for images.
That's right. And again, if you just want to get your feet wet, hopefully this has motivated everybody just to get their feet wet. Try getting an image from the space station. Every once in a while, you'll see it on the ARRL side or somewhere else. Hey, there's this celebration of 50th anniversary of blah, blah, blah. They're transmitting images from the space station between this day and this day. So just go ahead, put out your Mac mount, see your ISS detector, your favorite program, when that ISS is flying over, and see what you can pick up. You'd be surprised.
It's 12 minutes, Stephen. When they do that, you've got 12 minutes max.
It's quick.
Yeah.
It's quick.
So is it a slow STP signal?
Yes.
Exactly. It is an SSTV signal. Exactly. And remember, we did this presentation some years ago also. This SSTV was actually what they used in the Apollo 11 landing, right? Remember the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing?
That was like yesterday, wasn't it?
It was like yesterday indeed. And they used that in the telemetry. It's audio that was writing in the telemetry data stream, and they could actually see these images. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, it's only 11 minutes. It's very quick. And just to give you an idea, this thing is working. I mean, the ISS is what, 7.6 kilometers a second. I mean, that's
It orbits the Earth in 90 minutes.
90 minutes. Just, do the math there. It's pretty fast. So hopefully this motivated you to just give it a shot, and you'd be surprised at what you're able to do. Question.
FYI, the handset group meets. You might you'll get some of their net shortly after our net. We get them on, what was it, 145.19? Yeah, and that will also be some information to to read up on. Of course, there's the Hamsat website too. The Hamsat. Anyway, if you want to read up on get even more information.
Yes.
Satellites and what they are, and software that you can get.
Right. So,
Hey guys, can you all quiet down back there, please?
So yeah, the only thing to echo what Elisha's mentioning, there is a resource out there. There's a lot of resources on the internet, but there's one that seems to be quite serious, and it's amsat.org. So if you don't want to download or you have
have too many things going on to download the ISS Detector app or whatever, look at the AMSAT.org future passes, and it'll tell you, you tell it, I am an EL29DR or whatever your maintenance locator is. It'll tell you for whatever satellite in the dropdown, what the times are, when it rises, when it sets. So that's the information.
And as he was saying, MSAT has a net 147.19, I think it is, every Tuesday night here in Houston. So you can look that up and join into it. I listen to it sometimes right after our net. They're always welcoming strangers, new questions, newcomers. Very nice group.
They've got a good website as well.
Yeah.
Do they still do SSTV at the end of their?
I know they used to, but I know for a while they used to.
Yeah, amsat.org. Okay, well, with that, we're going to pass it on to El Presidente.
To officially open the meeting.
Now, I received 0 replies to my email out to the reflector about did anybody do field day from home. So I assume nobody did.
I did, no contact. Yeah, I did.
Or no contact, okay.
I had one contact, I contacted with Simplex through the Red Cross.
Okay.
Got Dom.
Yeah, Dom went to the Red Cross for part of the time. He was not feeling real well that day, so he didn't want to make the trip out and be in the heat. I don't blame him on that. On all transparency, I got a little bit of heat impact. I got a little bit sick from it.
It wasn't that hot.
No, I'm only 104 in the shade. Yeah, but Dom did spend a little bit of time at Red Cross. He is trying to build a relationship with them. They've got a new management. They're on Kirby Drive in 59. They've got a refurbished station. They're active. They're letting him in, so he's helping build that relationship, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to find out, there's been various ideas brought up. What do y'all want to do? We can get somebody in here to give a demonstration of the parking lot on satellites. We could do I don't know about soldering, but we can at least cut and cold assemble some 2-meter antennas.
If we do soldering, Mark has to wear pants.
Yeah, chaps, at least, yeah. What else did I have right in that here? How to tune a wire dipole. What about getting together once or yes?
How far out can we project the satellite crossings to make contact? Can you do a month in advance, or is it?
Depends on the software that you take a look at. The one that I use, the MSAT site, and they give me, I think it's over the next week.
Okay, so, because what I was thinking is we could actually plan a day to meet someplace outside of here, during the month, so we'd actually maybe hit one of the satellites. But I'm saying there'd be a short notice type of station. So we
have satellite, consistent satellite paths on the same satellite roughly every satellite. So
Okay.
we usually get at least one pass per day within enough, we can steer it. And there's plenty of satellites where we might be able to we might not be able to get to talk with it, but you can hear the transponders.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 a day that you could hear, at least hear the transponder. Yeah.
And there's a website that does it in real time. It's a K2YO or something like that has past predictions, within 6 hours of the current day. But the orbital, the orbital past prediction is updated, I think, once a week or something like that. The TOEs.
Okay.
Those are pretty good. Those orbits are pretty steady. So past predictions are very good. You can run them out
If we plant something like that when it cools off.
Yeah, when it cools off, yeah. Okay. Yeah, one of the ideas that I had heard last year was, yeah, if you live in northeast, southwest, whatever part of town, and you don't want to drive all the way across town, find a city park and sponsor a radio day in that park. Do that once a quarter, something like that. I know that we had tried that years ago. Terry, I've forgotten his last name now. We moved up to Huntsville.
Terry Moon.
Yeah, Terry Moon. He tried to do that a few times and was unsuccessful in getting attendance. But that's something we could do. Dick, I was hoping that Don was going to be here so we could talk about Dickens on the Strand. As I recall, he has received an invitation to that for us for this year. Last year, we backed out because there was some chatter about potential problems. And he looked around where he was going to be located, too many rooftops for him to be comfortable. So a lot of people backed out last year. No such worries so far this year. So Dickens on the Strand, I hope to join him on that in December this year. Any other ideas, guys? Any particular topics you want to have, like how to tune, how to adjust a meter, how to use a VNA? Maybe we could get something in, bring one in here and have a mag mount antenna, sweep it and see, so y'all can see the results. Give me some ideas, guys.
Sounds like a good idea. I'd like to follow up on a proposal. I think Don might have made it or you made it. And that's, of course, when weather turns better, when it cools off a bit, just arrange for us to go to one of the state parks, Stephen F. Austin or Brazos Bend, and just, it doesn't have to be winter field day, but essentially do what we did in winter field day.
Yeah.
Just set up your antenna, set up your transducer, and just enjoy the day in the park and get a POD activation.
Yeah, when we did Stephen F. Austin for Winter Field Day last time, me personally, I found the confusion switching between parts on the year and Winter Field Day contacts. And most people that I contacted, they didn't care that I was in the state park. They just wanted the field day contact. So, you know, somebody wants to do them together, great. I just soon have two separate days, have two different outings. Just because I like to be outside. What else did I have written down here?
So I do have Jamboree on the Air scheduled for October.
Okay. And what's the date on that one?
It's the third or fourth weekend, or I'll let you know, but it's
I think it's the third full weekend. Yeah, so it's typically around the 20th, 28th,
something like that. I'll give you all the information. I'm planning on doing it with a group of scouts, but I'll keep you all.
Yeah, just tell us where. Anybody interested in helping out with a radio merit badge for scouts?
What does that entail?
It's basically a tech license.
So I can send out that information. It's essentially signing up as a counselor, get training on you know, the BSA policies on what you like, you know, being around kids and stuff like that. And then there's a pamphlet that of requirements for the badge, like drawing a certain wavelength or discussing certain. It's like a discussion group, and then you make a few contacts. But I can send that over the reflector and see who's interested.
Okay.
Yeah. What's that?
I'm already.
I got two thoughts. One is I'll investigate and try and figure out how to do this simply. But I end up calling Mark. I say, hey, what bands are working this and that. He's shown me some of that several times where to go look, and I appreciate that. But it'd be interesting to have a chat window that people could say, hey, I'm on 20 meters, it's really hot, that we all would know to look, people that would share that with each other. So it'd be like a group.
Like a Slack.
And that we could all, anytime you're on, you could say, hey, this is working for me. And then everybody else in the club could go just look at that and see if somebody's having some luck someplace.
But that's what the spot now.
I get that, but I'm just saying between us, people living here with these antennas in this city, that would be a little bit more specific, you know, say, hey, Frank's doing it. I know what gear he has. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, with the Peruvian Radio Club, since they heard that I just made a contact, they invited me to a WhatsApp. It's like a messenger, but a WhatsApp group. That's exactly this, of people that are added to a list. And then when somebody says, hey, for example, the Russian people up in the station just launched a few CubeSats and they were doing MMS TV, here a few days ago, 2 days ago. So then one of the posts in there was, hey, the Russians are sending us images and such from the station if you want to, downlink.
So that's something, that's the one thing. The other thought is, I'd like to, I think Mark and I were talking about this at one time. A remote radio that you could contact and use as a station that you can actually software into and transmit from. Now, we are very blessed by being here at TransStar, and we think this is a fantastic facility, 5-star, and they got a great radio room upstairs. But there's a lot of security issues between us going up there. But if we could remote into a system, then everybody that tested today could get on, we could get them on the radio right now. But if we had a station set up someplace in town, you talked about money.
Yeah.
For asking for money from the ARL, that would be one thing I'd ask for, is a club radio that anybody could get onto. That had a decent antenna, a nice radio.
That would be nice.
But that would be a resource, for the club resource. That would be what I was thinking. I don't know if it's technically possible.
Closest thing to it, Hal, is there's a website or a piece of software called Handsphere, right? Which is basically, if you like, it's not actually an SDR, it's actually a website. But the only problem is you don't need to be licensed to actually use it. But basically, you can select different antennas. You can go on virtually any frequency, and it's kind of interesting just to get you used to it. But that's something that anyone can access remotely on the web.
Would you demo that next month's meeting?
Yeah, I can do that.
And you also said you've got one on that you can do on vintage radios.
I was going to say, actually, forget the internet and satellites and anything after about 1960. I'd actually like to do a show and tell. Bring in what Jeremy calls a boat anchor, right? And I actually got a transceiver, a World War II transceiver, which has quite a story attached to it. And if there's any interest, I'd be happy to share the story.
Next month.
All right, I'll do it. Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Dom was talking about a few months ago about going up to Monument Hill, if you're familiar with that. Range. It's got a 200-foot bluff. You can get your signals way out that high up.
Yeah, you do. It's up near the Grange. It's a little over an hour's drive from here. My place, if you really want something, I've got 2,300-foot elevation is at the peak of my property, but it's a 5-hour drive. So it's not a day trip. So I set my antenna on top of there, threw some wire out across the trees, and I was working almost to the Arctic Circle. Wow. I was working off of solar panels, pushing 100 watts.
What time of year was that?
I've done it summer, I've done it winter.
Winter ain't fun.
Well,
I've been to some longer than the winter.
yeah. It's up there near Garner State Park. If you need a landmark, it's a little bit past there. And my camp is at 2,100 foot is camp elevation. The peak of my place is 2,600 foot. But even from camp, you've got hill here and a valley running as far as you can see east and west. And so it's quite a conduit through there. So now we've got some ideas, some things to look forward to. satellite demo, VNA demo, our boat anchors.
Just for the record, I never called it that.
air.
Jared.
A presentation on, I'm sure we'd get somebody to give a presentation on remote radio so that we understand what is involved, what it takes, how you get into it. I'm sure we can find somebody to do that. Okay, that's what I was looking for. What has the club been interested in? Now I can help meet those desires for you. We don't have any markers, do we? Yeah.
There's one right there.
Yeah. One of the easiest antenna plans that I've seen, it's from On the Air magazine, put out by ARRL, and it was the January, February issue a couple of years ago. But you take an SO239, you got here's your threads. This is your plate. And this is your center conductor. They had the dimensions and instructions for building this for 2 meters for 40. I think they had it for 6 meters, no, 220 megahertz, the other one. You just solder a reasonably straight piece of wire to that center conductor, and then take pieces of wire out from all 4 of the screw holes down at a 45-degree angle, and you just set that in the top of a piece of PVC. And you tune it, the frequency with your stinger, the SWR with your ground radius. Just bend them up and down a little more. Now, it's maybe a 30-minute or an hour little project to get people on the air, very simple. So it's that kind of thing that, let's see, our newbies have already taken off, but something that we let our newbies know about. I've got this article downloaded. I'll send this out to the Reflector so that y'all, it has pictures that are much better than what I've drawn.
Oh, that's a Picasso.
What's that?
That's a Picasso.
Picasso, or like a dolly, Salvador Dali.
So let me ask you, so the idea over there would be to go ahead and put out a parts list so that people buy their own stuff and bring it to the club and do it, or just on their own?
We could do it here. If we can solder in here. I'm not sure if we'd be allowed to solder in here.
Yeah, we can solve it.
We can? Okay, as long as there's something on top of the table, I guess, huh? Okay.
Bring your own chaps.
I'm always chapping somebody. Yeah, we could get, since this is all just stiff wire, it can be insulated, it can be uninsulated. Yes, sir.
Welding rods for plumbers for that.
There you go. Yeah.
That's what I did years ago.
Some welding rod. That's a very good idea.
I don't have any more, but I made beautiful.
Yeah, some of the bar stock, the 1/8 inch bar stock that they sell at the home improvement store. Yes, sir.
I've been talking to Mark off and on, and it kind of fell into the presidents of other clubs communications, and they said, ask them about a map showing each club's repeater, which one they get on, which repeaters are linked. And I thought that was a good interpresidential kind of conversation.
Yeah, it is.
And the other corollary to that is, what are they doing that we should know about?
Yeah, there's we've got another meeting scheduled for the 1st of August, and that's one of the things that will be on there. But that repeater map,
They can all just submit what they use, and then we know. But then the map also have which repeaters are leaked. Like 1.7, you can go all the way to Galveston, right? There's different repeaters.
Yeah.
And they can reach all the way to Houston because they're all linked, right? But I'm not sure if you have to be on 1.7 the whole way, or you switch to that.
no, stay on 1.7. When I drive up to near Smithville, my brother's place, I'm on the 9.2 machine until I get almost to LaGrange. That thing's got some legs on it.
Mark helped me out too when I was going to Missouri on downloading all the readers for the trip, which was really helpful, you know. And then I also would switch to Simplex periodically and just transmit to see, you know, and I ended up catching more people on Simplex than I did on the repeater, which of the travelers.
Yeah, I was coming back in, driving through Waco, coming back, and as soon as I got on the south side of Waco, I was picking up the 1-7.
Wait a minute.
I couldn't call back in, but I can hear in.
Oh, okay. Well, sometimes no, there's other repeaters on the same frequency, but they're supposed to be far enough away that you don't hear them.
There's,
They have different tones.
I don't remember if it's 9.4 or 9.2, but there's one of the side frequency here and one of that frequency in Austin. And you can hear them back and forth during usually October is when I hear it, when it hits the tropo conduit kind of thing.
There's also 444.3, which is part of the WinLink system.
Yeah, that's a fun.
Pretty much worldwide.
Yeah, it is. That's a fun repeater.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not using tropo. That's just internet link.
Just internet, yeah.
Is that the Alaska net?
Yeah,
that's
morning
on
there.
We have a program again where if I was saying it's 12 o'clock, but that's person who has that channel, 444-300, he takes and has it change IRLP. Switches around.
Yeah, he switches around.
It stays on one link 90% of the time.
And I always, or almost any time, day or night, I could sing out and hear somebody from California on it.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll be monitoring it when I'm working out in the garage. And I'll hear, I need a demo. And you hear people from all over come in, including the fellow from New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can probably almost always hear Ron on there too.
And also 2 people from Israel. Let's see.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. He said there's some from Israel that chime in on sometimes too.
On the Tribune.
Is anybody hearing any chatter from Ukraine? You know, any shortwave or any kind of information coming out of there on radio?
I haven't been on HF in a while because my antennas are down. I just had to have my roof replaced, and since it went over the roof, like that far above the roof, I had to take it all down. Hopefully this next week I get it back up.
Excellent.
As far as I know, in Ukraine, though, they have blackout all ready to communicate.
One thing to remember, by the way, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment is that the Russian armed forces are confiscating every transmitter they find. So it's like Europe was in World War II. There were no radio amateurs, there were no hands in England, Germany, and France, not officially, because the authorities confiscated all the transmitters.
There was a company that were going to come out with a, call it a resistance radio. They wanted to go to World War II, find all the ones that, you know, kind of come out with one that sort of represented all those as a kit. And I would think that there's people sending out CW and all kinds of stuff.
But there's probably a load of kind of, surreptitious stuff going on. But officially, the Russians are confiscating everything. Every time they come across something, they confiscate or wreck it.
Same thing happened in during the Gulf War.
Same thing.
World War II.
Same thing. World War II in England, for example, British government on the second day of the war, which for Britain was 1939, September 39, they sent out, it was done by the post office, what they call the GPO, the General Post Office, who was responsible for radio. And they literally contacted every licensed amateur. There weren't that many at the time. They were mostly G5 and G3 call signs. And they just confiscated everything. And they didn't get them back until the late 40s. I know a friend of mine.
Same thing here.
Yeah, a friend of mine's father had a couple of old boat anchors, stuff like that. And they came back in a terrible state because they were just chucked in a warehouse. No storage, no air conditioning, no nothing. And they didn't actually, didn't get them back until 1950. So 5 years after the end of the war, it took them that long to get them back.
During World War II, you had a radio that had shortwave on it. You took it in to get it repaired. They were under orders to cut the shortwave off because they didn't want any Nazi propaganda coming across the airwaves.
I know that I remember reading an article that at the end of World War I, the Navy wanted to U.S. Navy wanted to take over control of all radio frequencies in the United States, and they were going to do away with amateur service. And that was the first big push that ARRL made, was to, no, you can't do that, and here's why. And they had all these examples of emergency rescues that were facilitated or made possible at all by amateur radio.
Same thing happened in England in World War II. And the British equivalent of the ARRL, the RSGB, Radio Society of Great Britain, they lobbied again, probably like the ARL, lobbied very heavily. At the time, there wasn't much amateur activity for the emergency services, like the Aries stuff that we do and all that. And that's actually what triggered it in England. And they said, okay, look, we're going to use this for emergency services and all that sort of thing. And I think that was what swayed the government to actually release the stuff. Otherwise, there'd be no amateur radio in England.
Yeah.
As far as confiscating radio stuff, anything that's Apple related, it's got Find By on it. The Russians steal it, the Ukrainians send them some go become fertilizer bombs.
The world is in quite a state. I've got an old HF radio. It's solid state, but it's 1985 vintage. I've got it locked away in a metal file cabinet that's grounded, just in case of a close lightning strike or other's EMP source. Yes, sir.
Ralph just reminded me of something. First of all, I want to thank Mark and Ralph for, I use them as mentors all the time, call up for things, and they always take my call and answer the question. And I appreciate them very much. Like any caller ID. Yeah. So a lot of clubs, what they do is they have like special interest groups. But what I was thinking of is if we had a listing of each member, what your strengths are, and would you be willing to take calls on that for those topics? Might be useful for everybody.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because I use them a lot. And I got to tell you, Ralph, that my 7300 and one of the software updates had an FT8 setup built in.
Well, if I had an SD card, I could download that.
Right.
Update.
Anyway, so Ralph,
it worked.
I've got 4 SD cards for 7300 owners that's got the latest firmware on it.
Oh, goodness.
And these are free for anybody who has a 7300 and wants it.
I want to play. You mean the one's 7300?
We're going to take one down to Ron Halfbacker because he's going to try and update it. If he doesn't use it, all right.
You get 2.
No, I only need 1. I got it. Mine's radio's okay.
Well, there's one. This
That's
one's 8
really
gig.
nice.
These others are 4 gig.
Thank you very much.
Why did you do that?
Huh?
Why did you do that? That was such a nice idea.
Very nice.
They're free. They're free at work. I mean, we're throwing them away. So I mean, we use 64 gig and beyond.
These already have the software on them?
Yeah. Anybody else?
Anybody? Viewers?
So what was, one thing to know is how do we actually upload the firmware? I guess we could just look up the instructions on the web.
There's also a how-to instructions on file on here, PDF.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, you can go to the ICOM website and it's all spelled out how to do it. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, the ICOM actually has very good instructions online and updates ready to download. Okay, well, I've got 2 actions here. I need to send out that antenna article and get started on a mentors list.
An Elmer list.
Yeah, Elmer. Thank you, Mr. Fudd.
What about the idea of the group on the messenger or on WhatsApp?
Yeah, we'll need to, I've got that down here I need to do some research on it.
Because
Find out what that is.
everybody might want to be added to the group, but some people might say, well, that's a good thing. So in case we have a question, we want just ask the group and somebody might check back, or which bands are active, the group might exchange that information.
Yeah, there are a couple of ham radio IO groups where you can post questions and get answers. There's one specific for Linux, one specific for FT8 or WSJTX. There's one that's generic for anything amateur related. But for propagation, we need it local because even though the propagation models and the web pages show what ought to be happening, what I've noticed is that my brother, who's up in Smithville, he can be seeing radically different HF conditions than I do.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, what I'm talking about is actually a messenger.
Yeah.
With the local folks that just exchange information.
Understand?
Just an IM group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The downside of that though is that folks may not want to be, binged all the time with idle chatter. But
you know,
you can set those things up to where it's notified once a day or as they happen or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, as simple as a messenger group without anything on the web, just what everybody carries, messages.
10:31 a.m. 3 notification.
Well, there's a fellow, there are a couple of fellows in the this club presidents group that we're putting together who are very good at this kind of thing. I'll bounce the idea off of them. We might want to get something going, just a whole Houston area, not just one club. So I'll pose that to them.
Is this like a wish list that we're putting together?
Well, there's kind of involved into that, yeah. It started off as what topics we want to do, but wish list is good too. What you got?
I take the club back to old times and years ago when this club was meeting over the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
You had a workshop, work day, and you built those bandpass filters.
Right. Like do bandpass filters, okay? Or so anything, huh?
I know where it lives. My base stations are in his garage.
Anybody need equipment, chief?
I got it.
Sounds like that's where our remote,
I need to talk to you about it.
Okay.
So what came up in the breakfast today was DMR, some interest in that, to get somebody from the digital group maybe to come out and talk to us about DMR.
Yeah.
What that's all about, how to set up the ins and the outs.
We can have Rick Broussard come in and do that since he programs all the DMR repeaters.
Could you contact him, please, sir?
Yeah. I'll see him next week, actually.
we didn't get information from Brad that,
Yeah, it's gonna be on everything.
Oh, I don't forget to bring the Houston Greater Syntax Net.
I'm getting pretty good at that.
Well, one other thing, just to put it on the schedule, it's not coming right up, but it's Pi Day.
Yeah.
I know that you were very keen on Pi Day, and it was something that the Sugar Land Museum of Natural Science or something. It's always a good idea to do a public outreach.
Yeah, the public outreach is one of my things. The museum was so surprised by the level of interest and a little Morse code keys, but just little door buzzers. I just put door buzzers as the sounder and an extra large paper clip for the key, and then a 9-volt battery clip on it. And the kids are going to town, and Dom, he says, "Hey guys, don't forget." No, what Dom? Dom was here at Transtar, and when the Sugar Land Chamber of Commerce representative heard him answer Homeland Security, which is accurate, she flipped. She just happily flipped out. All the kids were going too, but Mike Ulrich, he was there. He's with BVARC, but he was there doing the radio table and also helping out with Morse code. He said everybody must learn SOS. Mom, Dad, SOS. It's simple. It's recognizable. And you know how many people who were trapped under debris at 9/11 were rescued because they were tapping SOS on a beam that they could reach with a piece of concrete?
Yeah.
It took off. And the museum says, will you make us some of those to keep here permanently? They now have a box of them, 6 or 7 that I make for them. And every summer they bring them out when the kids are coming in. They have high school students that do, they call them the side tables. They break those out and have part of that upstairs, their discovery zone. So any ideas for outreach? No, I'll help with those. If somebody's got a contact but doesn't know what to do, I've got some ideas what to do. But I've not been real successful getting contacts to respond the past couple of years. I wonder why. What's that word? Pandemic. But I'll need to rebuild a lot of those contacts for sure. That's all I've got for this month, guys. Anybody else? Any other free flow? Train of thought, train wreck.
I'd like
Speaking of train wrecks, he raises his hand.
I'd like to appreciate Ralph for bringing this point up. It's essentially where does the membership want to take the club? And when that idea came across in the email from Ralph, I thought that's spot on, because it is our club. It's everybody's club. So if you wanted to be in a particular direction in a building of filters or talks about VNS, it's your club. So this is a great idea. Thanks, Ralph.
And don't forget, if you brought up the idea, you may get saddled with doing it, okay?
You might get,
Elijah's voice is kind of soft, but he says, don't forget the Houston area simplex net. It's a great effort. It really is. And they've been mapping out who can reach who all around town. And they measured radio signal strength in different locations, made notes of the antenna and the power everybody was running. So really getting a good map. On my little area down southwest side of town, we had for a short time, we had a local simplex going, and there were 4 of us on one night, and 3 of us could all hear each other.
Was that the one on 145.17?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, 147.550. That's what we're doing. But there was one fellow that could not hear me, and I could not hear him. Everybody else could hear both of us. And so I got on Google Earth and got his address and struck a line, and there's this cluster of buildings exactly on that line. So even though you may be very close to somebody, if there's an obstruction, with Houston having all these business centers all over with tall buildings, you may not be able to hit.
All these boat anchors.
Yeah. Anything else, guys?
We got a couple things. So we're going to have the meeting for the Houston Amateur Society is next Thursday, I think. And so we're due for our annual payment there, $20. So all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we can pay that bill. I've reimbursed everybody for their expenses. Jeremy, Rusty for the web pages, and Jeremy for some lingering food items from field day.
And coffee.
Ralph is squared on
I'm squared away.
pages. I don't think there's any outstanding financial matters here. We just got 2 memberships in, and so.
Don't forget, if you haven't paid your membership, to pay it now.
Pardon? Yeah, right. And then so we're going to have around after the payments to Jeremy and Rusty with approved balance for this.
Now remember, the last one that pays your dues for this year has to be president next year. I paid mine a while back.
We got one guy from that paid through the end of 23, so that was good. And then Scott Bingham, who was just took the test here, he just paid up for this year. So we're doing okay. You know, we've had some field day was a little bit more expensive than I thought, but that was okay. No problem there.
That's good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually we have almost no expenses for field day.
Right, yeah, I mean, our expenses are really pretty minimal. You know, we have reimbursements for coffee, the field day expense, insurance, and Zoom, and that's it. So we're all that. I checked the books yesterday, everything is spent and stuff, so we should be okay.
But I do have to say the people at Field Day did eat pretty well, so.
Yeah, no, right. Nobody squawked about it. So, you know, that, except it was too hot.
Everybody's talked about that. Right quick, just to let everybody know about net control activities for weekly net. It's pretty laid back, so if you want to join, you want to get the experience of doing net control. It's not rocket science. Every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. we just read a script and have your trivia questions or whatever. And so you're more than welcome to just chime in and let us know that you want to be part of it, and you'll be added to the roster. It's that simple. You're encouraged to do so.
You know, also, if you don't hear anybody talking, take it. Pick
it up.
The script, the net control script is on our website, if I remember
But you
correctly.
can even just fake it, you know, it's okay, we'll accept that, you know. I'm a
Make it till you make
volunteer. Yeah, I'm a volunteer, I'll take over, go, you know, that'd be enough. And if you think
Think Wayne.
Ralph, I think Wayne rather, that's a goal. Because he does occasionally get a taco and he picks for Peters.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
He'll get tacos on things and then it's not.
That's right. With me today.
Yeah, Monday, Tuesday.
But you know, he does like to talk about it, so.
One for us. Okay, the Houston Amateur Society supports all of the people, so the club is a member of that organization since we use that repeater. So that's our contribution.
Oh.
Okay, so it's not an individual. I mean, you can join as an individual, you know, which is fine, but that's club members.
Oh,
And that meeting is twice a year. You hear it on the repeater, you know, go announce it. But that one's mainly just, you know, events for the repeater. Ground crew, top crew, guys there, the local guys.
Also, we're still a member of the handy towns, because I know we used to we used to contribute to handy towns, which is, they help people with different handicaps, for those who are not interested, are not knowledgeable about that, that's what they do.
Yeah, Handy Hands will modify equipment for the hearing impaired, the sight impaired, folks with motor control issues. They help modify equipment for all of them and provide it. A lot of times they will get secondhand equipment, update it, and provide it to the hands with some sort of disability.
If you need a vote on that, we have to do it.
Elijah, do you happen to know what the membership is?
No, I don't, no.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure any of that's club membership. So the only reason why we belong to hands is because we're using those resources.
Yeah, I don't think they have any kind of couple clubs or anything, but that's what they do.
And just, no, Mark's comment was he didn't know if they have only individual membership or if they have a club-wide membership available also. I'll find out.
Yeah.
I've got that down for me to find out. Okay, guys.
I propose that we hang the president.
Second.
That some of you guys didn't take. So I would rattle them off if I had some tickets, but there's some, I think we need to give, what we need to do is we're gonna will this